Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Richard Schoenberger for the second time to expand a little bit on his journey, on his story in the army and at the police. If you haven't watched the first episode, the link is in the description. It was an awesome time where Richard shared his journey from the army to joining the San Antonio Police Department, becoming the investigator. A very engaging story. But today we're going to expand on some other topics, and I'm happy to have you again, Richard.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Well, there are a few topics that we wanted to cover. Probably not gonna dive into all of them today, but let's see what we can cover. First would be first topic is work and family balance. This is one of the topics that you proposed. Again, you can briefly remind listeners about your career, what you did, the military and the police, and then talk a little bit more about the balance.
Okay. Well, I guess by the title, everybody kind of knows I will say I've invested 30 years in law enforcement. I had 2 years initially in a police co-op unit, which is almost like a police reservist, but you're actually a student in college earning um, what would basically equivalent to internship hours while you're in college. And I did that up in Washington State with Spokane Police Department, which is very unique. One of the only departments that does that. They partner with a community college in order to allow students who are working on their criminal justice, administration of justice degrees, associate degrees, to be part of a program where they can respond to uh, non-violent calls, I would say. Nothing that takes any force. These are low priority calls, such as minor accidents and sometimes major accidents, but minor accidents, things of that nature, that will allow them to get the experience in law enforcement to see if they want to pursue that while they're going through college. But that's my extra 2 years. I retired from San Antonio Police Department with 28 years. And while I was with the police department, I was a full-time Army reservist the entire time, with the exception of 2 years that I'd taken off. Still employed by the federal government on what's called the inactive ready reserve, but not drilling every month as an active reservist in the Army. And so I don't know what you want me to expand upon that. We would talk a little bit about our work and family balance. I do have 5 children, grown at this point, but while I was working both jobs, I was raising 5 children, 4 daughters and a boy. So I call it half of a blended family because I married my wife and she already had 2 children from a previous um, marriage. And interesting story there. What we did was while I was in the reserve going to college, we had a uh, training activity where we went out to the field as a drill sergeant. This is after I completed drill sergeant school in the Army Reserves. They sent me to active duty drill sergeant school. And when I came back, I was a drilling reservist while I was going to college. My wife was in a medical unit and they needed land navigation training and they needed some other medical training while they were out in the field. They and this happens very frequently in the Army Reserve and in National Guard. We'll seek out other units within the United States and within the general geographic area where you are reservist and look for the expertise. Like a drill sergeant unit, for example, is very good in the basics. We were very good in teaching land navigation, very good in teaching soldiering. So this medical unit reached out to us and said, "Hey, do you have some drill sergeants that want to go out to the field and train some soldiers on a weekend?" So this is right in the middle of bow hunting season, and I bring my bow out to the field, and I'm practicing trying to get good, gonna make a small shot placement and be as humane as possible, um, while still doing Army Reserve stuff. But anyway, what happened was I was running a land navigation lane, and my wife was an E4 at the time, and I was a young sergeant, and she had asked me some questions about land navigation. I could kind of tell, hey, this is not going to be anything to do with land navigation. And once the drill weekend was over, where she was kind of like, "Hey, who's this guy?" And we started dating after that, and eventually got married. She was a single mom at the time, and this was up in Washington State while I was going to community college. Um, so that's those two children there were, I believe, 3 and 4. I want to say they're going to kill me for not knowing exactly, but they're probably 3 and 4 years old at the time, and I ended up adopting those young ladies. One is a school teacher right now, and one works for State Farm Insurance. So um, they both have kids. They're both raising their families and doing quite well. Geographically, we don't expect them to live 5 minutes away from us, and they don't. Um, One lives in Lubbock, Texas, quite a ways away. So um, we do often visit them and their kids, and everybody's doing well. But as we kind of pivot back to what you want to know is how are you able to balance work with family life? And I go back to that, and I do. The three other kids that I have are triplets, and they were born in 1998. So they're older now, in their mid 20s, starting their own families. Some, and others are still dating. They're all living geographically separated from our from where we live. But while they were growing up, one story comes to mind where one of my daughters was having some difficulty in elementary school. And it's kind of funny now, she's a school teacher, but this came up the other day. She was involved in a fight in the cafeteria. And I said, well, if this continues on, me being a police officer that I am, I can find out, who the school resource officer is and everything. And I did. And I contacted the vice principal, and they allowed me to actually go to school. And I don't want to call it a threat, but I ended up going to school. Can you imagine a sixth grader or seventh grader having their dad attend class with them? Dad showed up one day, and he's sitting in the back of the classroom. So that's one way I was able to kind of figure out, hey, I needed to get a little more involved in what's going on at school. And I sat through a class, and of course, she was rather embarrassed, but I'm thinking, this is probably something that was good for her in the long run, because she kind of tightened up her shot group and became a very good student from there on in, and did well. Um, so if I pivot a little bit, you can interrupt me and ask me any questions. But and as far as the police and Army Reserve life went, when I transferred down to Texas from Washington State, I was assigned to an instructor unit, and I kind of got uh, I became what's called a non-participant. That's where you're not attending regularly, and the best course of action for you is probably just go back into the inactive ready reserve. And if we need you later on down the road, we'll call you up. which they did end up calling a bunch of those guys in 1991 and 1990 for Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm in the United States. But for me personally, I did not get called up. I got called after I graduated the police academy. I had started working side jobs to sort of supplement my income because, I wasn't making a whole lot of money with five children. Or actually, I only had two children, and I found out that three were on the way, and they were all coming at the same time. So that was a very interesting experience. If you're out on patrol and you find out, hey, your wife has just had an ultrasound, and you have three children, the first call is to your immediate supervisor. Hey, I think I might need some time off there because that's a big blast right there. You know, it, it's a blessing. I'm happy that three came all at once, but it can be kind of challenging in and of itself because that was in 1998, and I was in the middle of a transfer to the bike patrol unit. I had only been a patrol officer on the street, driving a car, making calls for about 3 years, and what happened there was when I went down to bike patrol, it was like, when you go to a new unit or you start a new job or you start a new career, the expectation is you're going to be there and you're there for overtime and you're going to be there on time, where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be, and there's no excuses. And if you are late too many times, you get written up, that kind of thing. I mean, especially as a new guy. So I was kind of walking on eggshells down there at the bike patrol unit. And I had some very good supervisors down there that really understood what was going on in my life. And they were able to. And to this day, I mean, I still keep in contact with at least one of them. But they knew what was going on in my life, and that was something that I could see in the whole leadership thing that I wanted to kind of emulate in the Army too. Um, so if I could kind of backtrack a little bit, in 1998, after I had the children, I was got off topic a little bit, but while I'm at bike patrol, while I'm trying to basically work every job I can basically work, I remember one job I worked, I was standing in front of a grocery store, and I would get off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon while I was on patrol, and I would go down to this grocery store and stand there in the front door as a security guard in uniform, as a police officer, as a deterrent, and from 4 to midnight. And I had a guy walk in, he's tattooed from head to toe, and he's got his wife with him. And I heard him yell something at his wife, and I see them there arguing as they're walking in the front door. And all of a sudden, he smacks her across the face, and I'm about 5 feet from him. And I basically had to grab him and put him in handcuffs. And he was like, oh, I don't know why I did that, and he was all apologetic and everything from that. But I learned one thing, that anything can happen at any time while you're wearing that uniform, and you need to be ready for it. Uh, but after doing that for a couple years, I was kind of like wore out because the kids had not been born yet. I was like, man, I got to find a way to manage this a little better, get get a balance in my life a little bit, because I was getting off at midnight and I was coming to work at 6 o'clock the next morning and working from 6:15 to 2:15 in the afternoon. And that's when I said, I need to go to bike patrol. I need to go to something that's going to afford me a better opportunity. My wife was working days, I was working days, and and what we term the swing shift, or the power shift, the middle shift, from 4 to midnight, when a lot of things happen in the police department, or not police department, but in law enforcement worlds, in society. A lot of things happen when people get off of work in the evenings, probably more so than they do during the day. and I was working a daytime shift when I first started as a policeman. But when I transferred down to bike patrol, we go back to the sergeants and taking care of people. These guys knew, hey man, this guy just had 3 kids. Here we go. And it wasn't just the little stuff like, hey, you need some time off so you could, take care of your family. But it was the just the little things like when the kids were born, my wife had brought a cake down, and we had a cake at roll call, and the cake said on it had the names of the triplets on it, and it had them on it on the cake. So it was pretty cool um, that we could all share some cake at roll call. And they would always do that for people's birthdays. So, like every year, if you stayed down there, you had to bring a cake in yourself for the guys on your birthday, and all the officers did that. While I was in bike patrol, I came across a special forces command sergeant major named Gary McElliott, and everyone called him Mac. The guy was phenomenal. He knew everything. I mean, he was technically, tactically proficient. He was starting a drill sergeant unit at Camp Bullis, which is one of the military bases around San Antonio. And out at Camp Bullis, they didn't have a building for him to start this unit. But he had coordinated with his higher headquarters that, hey, this is going to be okay for us to start a drill sergeant unit here in Camp Bullis, right? It's only a battery, which is a company size of drill sergeants, basically. We're talking, maybe 50 positions for drill sergeants. And I had served with him in that unit that I'd come over from Washington State, and I came over to that instructor unit in the 90th ARCOM, I think is what it was called. Army Reserve Command had instructor units. But anyway, um, he started a drill sergeant unit out there, and he didn't have a building. So what we did is what he would always say was, we're going to liberate our own area of operations. So we were designated a building to use, and it was a classroom building, an old World War II looking classroom building, up on blocks somewhere on Camp Bullis. And we went in there, cleaned it all up, patched holes in walls. I remember one time we were told that inspectors said, "Hey, this building isn't livable. It's full of asbestos and all this other stuff." But all we really needed was a place to have a classroom where we could teach people the basics of, how to prepare them to go to drill sergeant school. And that's all we really needed the building for, because most of the guys there that he brought in were already drill sergeant qualified, a good core number of them. But that was a good group of guys. The commander was a guy they brought over from a medical unit, and all good guys. What had happened there was I eventually transferred out of there because I was getting promoted. I promoted to master sergeant, and there was very limited positions for first sergeants and drill sergeant units. And when we talked earlier in the first podcast, as you know, the Army Reserve, if you want to stay local, I had no room for traveling with triplets. There were 1 year old triplets, and um, me coming home and having to go somewhere on a weekend, at least one weekend a month, sometimes two. It depends, because when they say the Army Reserve is one weekend a month, it's one weekend that you're mandatory have to go to. It could be multiple weekends that you can volunteer for. And I've always been a volunteer. You start talking volunteer, I run out of fingers to say, how many times have I volunteered? Okay, volunteered for the Army, volunteered for Airborne, volunteered to be a Ranger, volunteered to be a drill sergeant, volunteered to be go to an assault climber course while I was in the Ranger Battalion, volunteered to go do this, volunteered to go do that. By the time I'm volunteered to do everything, you just kind of run out of fingers count. And there's multiple people in the Army that can tell you the same thing. And as I go on through this conversation here, I'll kind of sum it up by telling you, everything's has to do with volunteering in life. Um, but let's get back on track here. And as this SF first sergeant, Special Forces first sergeant, was forming this drill sergeant unit. I learned some very valuable things from him, and with some very, very good training. As a matter of fact, some of those drill sergeants in that unit went on to do some phenomenal things. One of them became a pilot. One of them became a platoon sergeant, first sergeant in the Army, full time, active. After 2000, when all the call ups were in 2000 from basically 2003 were most of the call ups after 9/11. So a lot of those guys went on to do great things. As a matter of fact, there's at least one or two police officers that were in that unit as drill sergeants. Those guys are making rank on the police department, doing great things. I think one of them's a sergeant, one's a lieutenant, one runs the night investigations unit for the San Antonio Police Department as a sergeant. He's one of the night supervisors, and he's still there, doing great things. He deployed in Iraq or Afghanistan actually, and got blown up, hurt his back, Purple Heart recipient. Great, great guy. He's still there, doing great things for the San Antonio Police Department, and I still keep in contact with him. Um, but eventually, I had to leave that unit because I did promote, and I didn't want to have to travel to be a first sergeant in somewhere in Arkansas or somewhere on the East Coast or West Coast, which is what a lot of people do. They'll get on a plane on a Friday night and they'll show up on Saturday morning, completely wasted, and all they do is power through PowerPoint presentations on readiness, because that's what a lot of the Army Reserve has to do for training is watch PowerPoint presentations, just so they're ready. Or you can check a box and say, he's received this briefing. And if you've received that briefing, you're ready to go to war. It might be multiple briefings. It might be something as simple as equal opportunity for all soldiers, or something as recently DEI was a topic that I think they've done away with now because of the new administration. Without going too much into the politics of it, that's a readiness function. The Army Reserve only has so many days. Usually it's 50 days a year, 2 days a month equals 50 days a year, 60 days a year. If you go 2 weeks out of that year to do training on a major installation, somewhere to do what your job is, and augment the active duty a lot of times to do your job. That's what the Army Reserve does if there's no war going on and they're not deployed, which is a lot of times. It just depends on what your MOS is, whether or not you're ever going to deploy. So I saw no opportunity to deploy after 2000. First off, in 1991, when they called everybody up, I was a drill sergeant, and they didn't need drill sergeants over to be driving trucks and transportation units and to train anybody in Desert Shield, Desert Storm when we went into liberated the country of Kuwait. So I missed the deployment again. I missed the Panama. I missed this one. And here we are setting up in 2000, or it was 1999. I transferred over to the 2nd Brigade of the 75th Trained Support Division. And what they did was they were observer controller trainers. They trained National Guard units to get ready to go to war. And 9/11 popped up. 2003, they called up a great number of Army Reserves by, Title 10 federal law, called up a lot of Army Reservists now. And at that time, my children were only about 4 or 5 years old, and it was an involuntary call up. The one time I did not volunteer, they called us up to support that. that training. So it was kind of a big shock for us. Everybody was thinking we were going to be deployed somewhere. Well, you got to kind of know the mission of the Army Reserve is um, we are the sustainers and we are enablers. And what I mean by enablers are we augment active duty units, and we have some special skill sets that some active duty units have, some do not. Um, for example, a civil affairs unit might have somebody that can run a power plant. Well, if you're in a civil affairs unit, and I say as a reservist, they might have somebody that can run a power plant or somebody that works for the criminal justice system as an attorney, or maybe they write constitutional law, or they're a judge, or a federal U.S. prosecuting attorney. I mean, there's a bunch of people that have those MOSs as civil affairs, so they can easily transition onto active duty from the reserves, and they can go to places like Afghanistan and Iraq where we have to build a nation. We have to create a constitution for the country of Iraq. And I had a unique opportunity in one of those units I was in. I see we're kind of I'm keeping track of time today, so we just don't run out. But I had a unique opportunity because the next unit that I transferred into, I became a command sergeant major in the 75th Division. When I was a command sergeant major, basically, we were kind of the readiness czar for the unit. I mean, we had to report how many people were ready, how many people are not ready to go to war. And the first unit I took had just come back from war. So they were all broken up and fragmented. And we had to basically put that unit back together because after war, a lot of people want to get out of that unit because they didn't really like the way things went when they were deployed. And at least that's been my experience in the Army Reserve. And so we put that unit back together. It took 4 years. And by the time 4 years was up, my tenure was up because they only allow you to do 4 years in one unit as a command sergeant major. And that's considered a long time because most of your active duty unit command sergeant majors don't stay that long. But anyway, I went out and found my own job in a civil affairs unit. I had a colonel there that was a full-time active duty colonel, and he did a phenomenal job putting that whole unit together, and it had just come back from war itself. And at this point, this is a brigade headquarters, so we've kind of moved up from a battalion size unit to a brigade unit, and I did 4 years with that unit. Came across a command sergeant major there named Mike Taylor. I was on a flight, and he sat next to me, and he goes, "Hey, have you ever thought of going over to civil affairs and being a command sergeant?" I was telling him, "Hey, my tenure's coming up here," and he brought me into the civil affairs world. I became a command sergeant major there. And by the time I finished out the civil affairs stuff, I had worked for three colonels over those 4 years, and all of them made major general, two-star general. And when I left that civil affairs unit, I went into what's called a nominative process to be a command sergeant major. And as a nominative command sergeant major, you have to submit a packet, and the general in charge of the unit that needs a nominative command sergeant major interviews you. And I kind of went over a little bit of that the first time, but anyway, I had a really good brigadier general at that unit. He had his own business. He managed just like I did. He was going to drill weekend every weekend of the month, carrying a BlackBerry, carrying a work cell phone, carrying your own personal cell phone, having an Army laptop, and having the laptop that you work with. So that's what I'm kind of alluding to when it comes to family and work balance. Everything you did for the Army Reserve was pretty much every night you are locked into some kind of battle rhythm where you can come in, you get off of work, and I was a detective. I made detective in 2007. From 2006 to about 2019 when I retired, I had three phones I was carrying. And I mean, I guess I kind of looked like a drug dealer everywhere I went, but I kind of looked like a drug dealer everywhere I went because if there's a critical incident or something that happens to one of your soldiers in the Army, you want to be the first person to know so you can get some visibility on it and find out, hey, man, commander needs to know about this. So his higher headquarters, some general somewhere saw it on the news and goes, hey, how come you don't know anything about this? That was the big secret. How come you don't know anything about this? Well, we had some incidents. I remember one particular incident where we had a soldier that was arrest. You've always going to have arrests for DWIs when you're in any kind of command structure, but um, I had my boss had told me that one of his staff had to check into a mental health facility, which was perfectly okay. It was all sanctioned by the Army. We want people to be able to do this stuff, but while I'm in the middle of watching the house to see if somebody's going to break in or not, or I'm in the middle of watching a car at a restaurant to see if somebody's going to drive up to a truck and break into a truck or something, I get a call. Hey, man, I just shot myself on the range. Uh, that's what I'm trying. We're trying to balance work and family, and then I get another call. My daughter might be suspended from school, or um, my daughter's not going to be going to this tournament, this volleyball tournament, or that volleyball tournament. It's all basically how you task organize and how you prioritize things. So of course, your family's always going to be first along the way, uh, but it's never really going to go away. And examples of that are, look, you're going to be doing multiple things like you are right now. Um, I was enrolled in college. I was enrolled in the non-resident the non-resident sergeant's major academy, and I was working a side job, and I was working as a detective all at the same time. And as a detective, you're getting 10 to 15 cases a week. And if you don't put those cases away, you're going to be coming back to 30 cases the following week and 45 cases a week after that. So what I mean by put them away is you have to figure out, are they solvable? Do we have solvability factors? And we can get into that later on, time permitting. But the bottom line is you've always got to have your day planned out before you go into work. So you can't just go into work and say, I'm going to go down and sit and drink coffee all morning long and then go back to the office and sort of stare at the computer and surf the internet. I mean, there's just no possible way. There's not enough hours in a day. And for the type of detective that I did most of my career doing as a property crimes detective, there was no authorized overtime unless it was a high priority case. And I would probably count on one hand that they said, hey, we need you to work overtime for XYZ because we can actually solve this case, or we have a task force that's popping up that we need to do that. So that kind of puts us back to where we were when I sort of finished up my career. I retired from the Army in 2019. I freed up time for me on the police department, and I was able to dedicate nothing but my time as a detective to burglary of a vehicle. And it's kind of interesting. There are probably, like I was mentioning to you, 1,000 guns taken from the city of San Antonio out of vehicles, trucks, cars every year. Well, if there's 50 property crimes or 60 property crimes detective, you got to divide those cases up throughout the course of all those detectives. And if you have 5 stations and 10 detectives, just throwing average numbers out there, and 10 detectives at each station, that means you're going to have to do the math on that and figure out you're going to have 50 cases you've got to spread out to those 5 stations. So what they did was, rather than spreading out all those cases, then these are cases that are actually solvable too, by the way, because a lot of times when guns are taken, there's no video, there's no way, there's no fingerprints, there's no what we call solvability factors. Is there prints? Is there video? Is there a witness? Is there anything that we can trace that gun back to the point where it was stolen? Uh, is the gun recovered? Things like that. Um, some of the cases that we worked, probably running over on time a little bit. Some of the cases that I worked while I was doing that, I was able to come up with a database of every car burglar in San Antonio that had been arrested. Because if you've been arrested, they take a picture of you. If you got a picture of you, we would keep a file on those people, and we eventually put it together. There was another detective that worked in the covert unit, and the covert unit guys, they're completely plain clothes, and they do a lot of investigations that are specific to surveillance. They're specific to investigative techniques that some stuff I can't get into, but anyway, I think you get the picture. Undercover, using confidential informants, things of that nature. Uh, this other detective, he had a file, and I got together with him, and we started emailing each other back and forth and texting each other, and we got to the point where we could tell when we looked at a video the mannerisms of certain people that we looked at. We could tell by the way their body moved. We could tell by certain facial hair. If their face was covered, we could tell what their eyes looked like from their mugshot, and we were able to file certain cases that normally you'd say, "Oh no, you can't file that case because you don't have any fingerprints," or "That guy's got a mask on." Well, we were able to file them and put people in jail for those breaking in, stealing guns, and stealing cars based on certain things that they were able to, that we were, can't give you all of them, but there are, because I don't know who may be watching this, but there are certain ways to identify people without simply just saying, "Hey, is this the guy?" And you show them a mugshot that's 10 years old or 5 years old or even 6 months old, where the guy had a beard and now he has no beard, or where the guy has hair and he had no hair in the mugshot. So criminals would change their appearance just as easily, but you can't change your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, certain facial features that will always be the same. And even in Florida now, they think they use facial recognition software where they can actually measure the distance between your eyes and the distance between the tip of your nose to the bottom of your chin. There's certain things that they're able to identify people with. Prior to them having that software and those algorithms that could hit on that software, we could identify people from mugshots based off of video, and video that was either inside of vehicles or video that may have been, you know, something they walked in front of at a business, on the outside of a business, prior to breaking into a car, prior to maybe they frequented the business before they decided they're going to go back out to their car, and they look in the car next to them and they break into the car. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to trace this stuff back, and some of those with same thing as the military, and that's where kind of a lot of stuff I did parallel to military. We call those techniques, tactics, and procedures, or tactics, techniques, procedures. The same thing as a detective. Certain techniques, tactics, and procedures. The military is not going to give you the whole ball of wax and say, "Here you go, you can have it," so the enemy knows how to counter it. We're not going to do the same thing in law enforcement, and I wouldn't do that in this in a podcast. But there are some things that I can divulge where there's some scams that the public needs to be aware of. And I had one. I actually filed with the Bear County DA's office over 1,000 cases in my career. as a detective, which was about close, right at 15 years as a detective. When I retired, it was like 2 months shy of 16 years. Um, when you file a case, you put it all together, and you have to take notes of every single thing that you do. So when you're going out and you're collecting video, you have to have a time and date you collected that video, who you collected it from, and you have to put all this into a package to file with the district attorney's office. And one of the notable cases that we had was we had a high-ranking administrator on the police department that had his house broken into. The MO, what we call the modus operandi, how they did it. That's the how they did it. Um, broke basically kicked in the front door, and they're in this person's home. Did not have any video at all. Um, we were able to find video up the street, 3 houses up the street that pointed towards the street. And we could pull that video and find out that that car went down the street. And we had already identified the people that were in the car a couple of weeks earlier. And the same people that broke into that home a couple of weeks earlier were in that same car. And we were able to identify certain things on the car, certain damage to the car, and certain things that the car was missing when it drove up the street three houses away up the block. Now, we weren't able to find out that those same individuals kicked it in, but we could take a shoe print from the case 3 weeks earlier and find out the same shoe print was on this guy's front door. So once we found that, and we found out that we could identify this guy that had been out on bond, because they get arrested, they don't stay in jail, they get back out on bond. He was out doing these burglaries again. And we were able to go back and take that shoe print and bring this guy in, first of all, on a warrant, based on a lot of these things that were basically the same. We have to develop a probable cause, of course, but basically whole lot of circumstances were the same in both cases, enough so that we could pick this guy up, and because he was on bond as well, revoke his bond, bring him in, and we were able to find out where he was staying. And the very same night, we were able to execute a warrant on the address where he was staying, and we recovered all the property that was taken from this gentleman's house. Uh, and it was all because somebody up the street had a camera, and another detective in the office next to me, a detective named Rudy Salgado, had seen this had handled this case 3 weeks earlier and said, "I've seen this car before." And I said, "Really?" And he showed me the car, and he showed me these guys had been identified, and we went to find these guys, and they're hanging out over here at this house with the mother-in-law. I went in, I put this all together. Every time you put a warrant, you write this all up, all the circumstances and all what they call the totality of circumstance forms your probable cause. Um, and a reasonable person would believe this guy was responsible. The car's in the driveway, and I had some uniformed guys go along. I had the unit that handles this stuff. We have a repeat offenders unit, and they go to these places and execute these warrants while the property crimes detectives, he's there. He's not going to be the guy, knocking on too many doors other than going and saying, someone opens up the door. We don't necessarily have to kick in a door if somebody will open up the door and say, yeah, he's here. He's in this back room back here. So Mama opens up the door. We go to the back room, and here's all the stuff laid out there. Most of the stuff. Were some things that we didn't get, but we brought these guys back, and they confessed to it, and we were able to put this whole case together and file it with the district attorney's office. I think the guy ended up getting like two. I think on that particular case, because he had multiple burglaries, he ended up getting like 5 to 7 years in in state prison for those burglaries, and that one in particular was pretty solid. Uh, we've had other cases that you can put away real quick. I had a case when I first started out where a guy was on eBay and he wanted to buy a car. So he sees a picture of a red Pontiac Fiero on eBay and he goes, "Hey, it's only $5,000. Shoot, I'll just send this guy $5,000 through." Now it's their cash apps and things that everybody used, but at the time he used PayPal to buy a picture, literally buy a picture of a car because he thought he was going to get a car. So he goes out to where this guy's stringing him along through emails and telling him, "Hey, I got a car right here for sale. Uh, and you can come out and I'll sign the title into your name. You just come out to my house and this is how we'll do it." He'd never seen the car before in his life. He didn't inspect it, didn't do anything. He just said, "I'll give you 5,000 for it right now." And he goes through PayPal and gives him $5,000. Well, he didn't hear from him after he gave him the $5,000. It's a scam. So I was like, well, how the heck am I going to solve this? So I go out to where the guy's supposedly living. On this particular case, they had phone calls back and forth, and the guy that bought the car had actually had uh, a voice uh, recording of the conversation he had that this car. So he was watching Discovery Channel at the time, and he's watching a program on called Bigfoot Hunter on Discovery Channel. And there's a there's this show called Bigfoot Hunter has a guy on there that says he found a Bigfoot carcass in San Antonio, Texas, right outside the city limits of San Antonio. And he was parading this carcass around all over and trying to get credibility, saying he's a Bigfoot hunter and he found this thing. And I'm like, well, this sounds like a scam right away. I mean, there's no Bigfoot in San Antonio. So I did some research on this guy because of the Discovery Channel show. My victim, who bought the car for $5,000, says, "Hey, this guy is saying he's the guy that found Bigfoot, and he's got a recording of his voice." So we kind of put this together, and I contacted this guy by phone, and I said, "Hey, I heard you discovered Bigfoot and everything," and I'm thinking, I'm talking to a suspect here, and I'm like, do you sell cars as well?" "Oh yeah, I sell cars." Do you sell cars on eBay?" "Yes." Did you sell this specific car to this man on eBay?" Click. He hangs up on me. Right? I didn't think I was going to get anything out of him after that, but it turns out, um, I after that, I mean, I tried several times. I sent him a certified letter to his last known address where this car was supposed to be. I went out to the location. There's no car. This guy was a renter, stayed there for 3 months, bailed on the landlord, owes the landlord money, and he fled to Mexico. And now he's purporting himself as some sort of Bigfoot hunter that travels all over the world to search for Bigfoot. Anyway, he ends up down. I put out a warrant for his arrest. Basically, I went to a judge, and a judge signed a warrant based on all the facts that I had and the case. And that was just a real quick case, uh, less than a couple of days. Well, 2 years later, he gets picked up on the U.S. Mexico border trying to enter the United States as the Bigfoot hunter with a felony warrant for stealing this guy's $5,000 for a picture that he paid for on eBay. And ends up going to court. And I think at the end of the day, we submitted a voice recording and some other things. And uh, he ended up with a very light sentence. But that's what can happen when, I mean, you don't want to. He didn't want to communicate with the police on that, have anything to do with it, because he was defrauding all these people using this scam on eBay. Who knows how many other people? Maybe, I think I had 3 or 4 other people that claimed the same thing. One was from Arkansas. If you ever become a victim of something like that, you have to contact the local jurisdiction because a San Antonio police officer can't help you in Arkansas where your case happened. Had another case very very similar to that, where the guy bought a picture of a car, and I was able to find out this car and basically tell the suspect, the perpetrator in this case, listen, you can either over the phone, I'm talking to somebody because this is the contact that the victim has given me, the contact number to the suspect, and I've called him over the phone and I've said, look, you can either get a cashier's check and bring it here to the police station, and I'll give it back to the victim, or you can meet the victim here. But if he doesn't have that in 2 days, we're going to put a warrant out for your arrest. Well, with just that threat, I've had people show up to the police station, pay for what they stole, and pay the money back because they do not want to get involved in that aspect of it. Now, can they still technically file charges? Did he still commit a criminal offense? Yes, we all know that he did, and you could still file charges. But with property crime, it takes the victim. The victim has to consent to want to file charges. Versus with a crime against a person, the state is going to file charges on you regardless. And that's the biggest difference here. Sometimes these things can be handled through civil matters. I saw one the other day where something had happened with a Tesla, and they said, listen, this lady lost it. She's off her rocker. She's keyed up these cars, or keyed up a car. The victim has to want to file the charges. And if he gets paid back what it costs to fix the vehicle, or he's not out anything other than, look, I think they learned a lesson. It's going to be more. It's going to be more so. The victim's going to be more out than what some people believe is in the interest of justice, depending on what the district attorney's philosophy is. Then handle it as what we would call a civil matter. I mean, as far as cases go, there's a ton. There's just a ton of them. We're talking, thousands of cases. Not every case gets filed. I would say an average detective would probably get 500 to 1,000 cases a year, sometimes that they had to look through and go, hey, can I do anything with this? So every day you're constantly doing that. Um, for me, I would still have to make sure that I'm keeping up with what's going on in the Army because as a senior enlisted um, non-commissioned officer, it was my responsibility to make sure that my guys were trained and make sure that my guys had education, make sure that they were going through leader development so that they could be promoted, make sure they were being promoted on time. Everything is tracked with the metrics that tells you this guy's due for promotion. Has he gone to school? Is he required to go to school? Can he pass a PT test? Can he do? There's several different pieces to the pie. We just don't grab people and say, we're going to make you a command sergeant major tomorrow, and you're going to have a general for a boss. And I'm sure you understand. But that's that pretty much that puts us where we are now. Um, you know, back to when I first started, I said about being a volunteer. I on the police department, I didn't have an opportunity when you talk about balancing uh, Army Reserve with police department. I have just as much of an opportunity as everybody else to promote. I had just as much of an opportunity as everybody else to participate in. There are certain units that you can volunteer for. You can be on the SWAT team, but there's a few things that people need to realize if they're going to sort of follow the same career path. Is that the Army Reserve is not going to halt for the police department, and the police department is not going to. The only halting that the police department's going to do for the Army Reserve is to support you by saying, okay, you can leave and go do your time in the Army Reserve that the federal government requires because that is federal law, and they can't keep you from doing that. They can keep from paying you, but they can't keep you from going and doing Army Reserve duty. And as a matter of fact, San Antonio has been very supportive. The chief of police in San Antonio has been very supportive, and most chiefs of police throughout the country have to be very supportive of the Army Reserve, because a good number of the police department does get mobilized, activated, deployed, and come back to duty, and they are considered assets because. If they weren't there and they weren't allowed to do that, you would have to train somebody fresh from the academy to start that all over again, the whole process all over again. But yes, they are. The city gives you 15 days of a year, and that's not enough to cover every weekend. But you can take leave without pay. You can use your vacation time, which generally I did when it comes to work and family balance. I burned in almost all of my vacation time, which was up to, I believe, 16 to 20 days by the time I retired, or at least back in 2019. It was up to like 30 days a year. That was used to do Army Reserve training. It was not used to go to Cancun with the family, go to Disneyland, go to Disney World. So those are some sacrifices you have to think about making before you decide to embark upon the same career path or track. Because you can't stay in the Army Reserve as an E4 specialist, just going to one drill weekend per month for 20 years. There are requirements in the Army to promote to in order to stay in. So those are also some things that that somebody would need to think about. But like I'm trying to in my mind think about how many times I actually did volunteer, and again, it's going to be over both fingers. But you can say, if there's anyone that's a command sergeant major that did not volunteer more than 10 times for something in the Army, whether that be an Army school, whether that be a deployment, whether that be who knows what, I would submit to you that they're probably not being completely honest. Because I think, if you look at it from a perspective, okay, you volunteered to enlist. After you enlist, you're volunteering to move on past your military occupational specialty MOS. Um, so you're volunteering for an MOS because everybody's baseline a soldier. You volunteer to be a soldier, so that's two things you're volunteering for: to be a soldier, and the second thing is to be um, uh, whatever job that requires, because everybody is a soldier first and foremost. And I think you've had. I know some of the generals you've talked to have at least been able to burn that in a little bit over your podcasts. But when you think about it, you volunteer to be airborne, and now airborne has several different facets to it. I mean, later on in your career, you might volunteer to be a jump master, which you do. I mean, you're volunteering to take up a new position, to be a team leader, to be a squad leader, to handle a certain weapon system. You volunteer to go to school to learn how that weapon system functions. You're volunteering how to drive. I learned how to drive a stick shift in a Jeep in the Ranger Battalion. I learned how to ride a motorcycle in a Ranger Battalion. I didn't know how to do either one of those things. I mean, grew up in a big family. We didn't have a whole bunch of toys to show, show us how to ride a motorcycle and things like that. So I don't know how many times I crashed going out and doing training as a ranger. You just get back up and go, I'm fine. My elbow hurts. Let me just rub some dirt on it, and I'll be fine. And you get back on the motorcycle and you continue to train until you get proficient with it. And then pretty soon you're to the point where you're completely blacked out in the middle of on a runway somewhere at oh dark 30 in the morning, with a pair of night vision goggles and no other light, and you're feeling your way around this bike strapped to the side, the inside of a C-130, and they land on the runway, and the ramp goes down, and you got to unstrap this bike, turn the bike on, make sure your night vision goggles are working, right off the ramp of that bike and not hit a runway light out there that they completely blacked out and that you can't see, because the early night vision devices had nothing but one little round circle about the size of a piece of pie, or a small pie, and you're riding a motorcycle, 50, no, I won't say 50, but 45 miles an hour across the runway trying to get somewhere, which is a main access, part of your mission, main access of advance of the enemy trying to come in and stop your forces landing on the runway. And, you set up a position where nobody can come in. And, you might have a couple other guys with you that parachuted in at the same time that you landed in a helicopter. And all you're doing is riding a bike around, making sure that everybody has what they need, or making sure that there ain't any enemy outposts or little outlets around the airfield. So that, I mean, you can kind of see that there's a lot of stuff, that you learn in the military that can kind of carry over into the police department. And the police department is a paramilitary organization, always has been. It has a rank structure. It's what we would call a formal rank structure. There's no CEOs in the military. There's a chief, and he could be considered a four-star general to your organization. And when it comes down to it, um, he's got the word on everything, and it's pretty much the same thing within the military, with the exception of you have an enlisted force, and in the police department, your enlisted force is the force. Um, the organizational structure that comes up with strategic plans and operations and SOPs and operating procedures on the police department are your higher ranking administrators who made rank, who had already done the stuff that you would consider the privates, the specialists, and even to a certain extent the sergeants do in the army. I mean, things sort of very well parallel each other on that token. Even in the disciplinary world, I mean, you have administrative discipline in the Army. You have non-judicial punishment, which we would call giving somebody a fine, an Article 15. And then you have judicial punishment, where a person breaks the criminal law. You have the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The police department has something fairly similar. They have administrative punishments. You get suspended a few days for doing something. I fortunately had never been suspended. I think the worst I got was for a driving incident where I got into an accident and I was charged with causing the accident. It was a one car accident anyway, and it was pretty much my fault. Where I was a young officer driving too fast in the rain, and I slid, did a couple 360s on a major interstate highway, and hit a guardrail. And that was the only time I had ever received any disciplinary action. Um, Now, that being said, you have officers that get in all kinds of jams doing things over the years. But when it becomes criminal in nature, you're held accountable through criminal laws versus just being a suspension or something for an administrative punishment for violating a rule or regulation of the police department, or you know, similar to something where you're not going to go to jail for it. there's not going to be lawyers and attorneys and judges and everything involved. There are boards, administrative boards on the police department that analyze what you do when you do get in trouble. And I've sat on one of those boards over the years. And what happens is you can kind of evaluate it based on, and the civilians sit on these boards as well, based on whether or not it was reasonable this person did this, even though he violated the procedure, or is it just an honest mistake? Because people can make mistakes, but do we want to fire them completely? No, not necessarily. Or yes, we do. So that's why they do have boards set up for that on the police department. Now, with the military, that type of board, UCMJ board, things like that, really don't really exist. That's a commander's discretion. When an administrative penalty is warranted, anybody in the chain of command can forward that up to the commander, and the commander, based on whatever rank he is, has so much authority that he can give people a fine, which is what they call an Article 15, and there's different types of Article 15s, but basically those are fines for administrative things. But I got a little bit off topic there. I don't want to get too far off topic for you. But anyway, that's how I kind of wanted to end it. If you think you're never going to have to volunteer for anything, like I said earlier, I volunteered to be part of the Burglary Vehicle Task Force. I volunteered to be a policeman. I volunteered to go to bike patrol. I volunteered it's unlimited. You could volunteer to go to SWAT training, and I said earlier, as long as you don't quit, just never quit. Well, you can kind of qualify that by saying you might not be qualified to be something. You might not be technically and tactically proficient to do something, which is completely understandable. But that doesn't mean you quit. So you can keep on going back until maybe you do get in, or you might not want to do that again. Like I tried out for SWAT one time, and it wasn't something that I had a future in. And there's several reasons for that. I mean, it's gonna cause a lot of. I would say I did moderately fair. I mean, there are guys that's the sole reason they want to be on a police officer is to be on the SWAT team, and my motivation was probably not where it needed to be to do something like that. I think physically I was at the level that I could have done that. But did I want to dedicate that much time? And that's ultimately what you have to be able to weigh whenever you're working two or three jobs. And I don't think since the time I joined the Army or got out of the Army, at least, I didn't have at least a couple of jobs. Even being a student is a job in a sense because it requires something from you. You may not be paid as a student. Of course, you're not paid. You have to pay to be a student. But if you put in that work, and that's what you want to, that's what you need to do is put in that work. It may cost you something, but that payoff is something that will pay you back in the long term on the back end, so to speak. So yes, you're going to volunteer at the end of the day. And I had a lot of opportunities to volunteer, but everything I volunteered for, I did not necessarily graduate from or become a success at doing, or even accepted as being as doing. Because at any time, whatever you volunteer for on that civilian police side of it, um, the person in charge can say, well, I mean, it's just not time. Could be a myriad of reasons. Um, so you gotta, those are all things that we take into account. But I think at the end of the day, we look at a total body of work that we've done. We can kind of look back and say, well, no, I'm not gonna like beat my own drum here and say, look at me, all this stuff on the wall is me, me, me. It looks great for me, but more so that this is this particular room that I'm in has a lot of stuff on the wall that was given to me. And for me to just put that into a box and say, oh, I don't need any of this, it's an I love me wall, is basically saying everybody that worked for you to be in that organization doesn't count to you anymore the rest of your life. So that is something that people don't really consider. And I look at it like that this stuff on the wall are all gifts from places where I've either served or I've been a part of an organization that felt like I was something that they wanted to remember and something they wanted me to remember them by. And that's why I keep this stuff around. And some of it will be donated back to uh, some of the units I was in eventually. And some of it will go to my kids. But at the end of the day, this is a culmination of volunteering and service throughout the course of your life. And it's easy for people to say, well, he's just there, and that's an I love me wall, and that's this and that's that. But these are things that they mean a lot to me because of the people and the organizations I was with, not because I'm given something that nobody else has. But I still have a knife on the wall over here that was given to me by my squad leader at the time, who served 10 years in Delta Force, and still is a very successful businessman and director at a major weapons manufacturing company, and has contracts with the United States government and other police agencies and everything else. And for me to take that knife and go, "Well, I'm just going to put it in a box because what am I going to do with it? It's got my name on it. It tells me when I was served." I think that's basically a tribute to that man individually as a leader, and that organization that I was with that took the time for some guy like me that only served 4 years. They took the time to put money together on a limited budget, so that I would remember them by that. And you know what? I can still call 9 out of 10 of those guys that I served with in the same squad 35, 40 years ago. And so, yeah, it means more to me. It's not an I love me that I got this gift. It's I'm thankful that I got that opportunity, and it's something that I believe those guys are ultimately wish I was there to pitch in to give them something when they got out, because if that's the least they can do, that's enough for me at the end of the day.
Well, Richard, I really appreciate your stories, your lessons, and everything you shared today. I hope to have you back on for the part 3 someday. That'd be great. But thank you for coming up today and for everything you shared. It was my pleasure.
You got it anytime, Danny. Thanks.
Thank you.